All right, good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? So I'm pleased to present today's panel. It's the analytics of the Tommy John pitching epidemic. Just a word of note, we're going to be handling Q&A through open mic system. So the panel will last roughly 45 minutes, and we'll try to leave 10 to 15 minutes at the end for questions. With that, I'd like to present today's featured speaker, Dr. Glenn Fleisig.
Okay. Hey, good to see everyone this morning. So this is actually different than what I usually do. I usually give scientific conferences with a laptop and everything, and not usually on a panel. And then in this presentation, actually, I'm going to show you some stuff you've never seen before, probably, about Tommy John injury. And really, this panel, I don't know if you saw the original schedule. I was supposed to split this time with a local professor from New England. Professor Bill Belichick was supposed to talk about football and baseball aerodynamics, and he couldn't make it. So, but Bill did send me a quick little clip of his presentation he was going to give you guys. So let's watch this first. You want to click the next thing? Oh, sorry, I should be doing this thing here. Let's click. Here's his presentation. You want to play that video there?
We all know that air pressure is a function of the atmospheric conditions. So the atmospheric conditions, as well as the true equilibrium of the ball, is critical to the measurement. I'm embarrassed to talk about the amount of time that I've put into this, and I'm happy to share this information with you to try to tell you some of the things that I have learned over the last week, which I've learned way more than I ever thought I would learn.
Okay, so I'll try to be as exciting and dynamic as Professor Belichick, but I'll just talk about baseball instead. So let's do this here.
We all know.
Okay, so we had enough of him. And we'll talk about Tommy John epidemic. And let's see. So in this hour, I'm going to talk about four things. I'm going to talk about what is Tommy John injury, and what is the surgery. You know, we all hear about that. And then I'm going to talk about the perception versus the reality about these injuries. And then I'm going to talk about the risk factors. How come some people get hurt, some people don't? And this is, as a crowd, this is stuff analytically we want to know. What are the real risk factors versus the rumors? And then finally, I'm going to conclude it with some exciting steps that are happening now in the prevention attempts, or the prevention motions for these Tommy John injuries. So let's start. I'm going to tell you a little about the guy on the left of the picture there, or Tommy John. Who is Tommy John? And also a little about me. Why am I here talking about this? So Tommy John was a pitcher for the Los Angeles Dodgers back in the 60s and 70s. And then in 1974, 75, he hurt his elbow. And then he went to go see Dr. Frank Jobe, who is right there, sporting a 1970s type of color outfit on his clothing there. And Dr. Jobe told Tommy, I've spoken to both of them, told him that your elbow's blown out, and he said, I think we could try something. We could try moving this tendon over here and putting it in for your Tommy John, it's not called Tommy John ligament, for your ulnar collateral ligament, and we could give it a try, and otherwise kind of just call it quits. And Tommy told Dr. Jobe, let's give it a try. So they did. And Dr. Jobe had been thinking about this for a few years ago. He'd been thinking about it since about 3 years earlier when Sandy Koufax hurt his elbow, but he didn't form the thoughts. And then he tried it on Tommy John. And Tommy John ended up, super huge success. He ended up pitching another 14 seasons after that surgery, and then the rest is history. So that's who Tommy John is. Let me just tell you who I am. I grew up in New York, and then I went to a local college over here called MIT. And at MIT, honestly, I was pretty good at math, but I liked sports, but I wasn't very good at it. So I played intramural sports at MIT, and I studied mechanical engineering. And then at the end of MIT, I found out there was what was called a biomechanics lab. So in mechanical engineering, I found out I could go study sports motions. This is a picture, we were doing a golf study in the 1980s there. So never before had I thought my life would be separate. The sports and the engineering, I didn't realize sports and science could go together. And so I put it together and started studying it. And I asked my professor, Professor Mann, if there are any jobs in this. And he said no. So I know there was a career fair here. And there were no jobs in it. But there was an internship. So I went to the Olympic Training Center. They had a biomechanics lab back in the 1980s. And then I tried to get a job doing it. But there was no job. I did meet a young doctor named Dr. Andrews, the guy over here, above Albert Einstein here. We clicked very well, but he didn't have a job ready for me yet. He was talking about starting a center, but he didn't really have one yet. So I went on and got a master's degree at Washington University. Dr. Andrews then called me up like 2 years later. This was before the internet and stuff. He must have kept my phone number or something and said he's ready to start. And we started the American Sports Medicine Institute. That's a picture of us back in the days. And here we are many years later, still working at it, okay? And besides ASMI, I finished my PhD at UAB there in town, and I'm currently still at ASMI. I'm going to tell you about our work there. And also, I am an advisor for Little League Baseball, for Major League Baseball, for many of the teams, for USA Baseball, and for a company called Modus, which I'll tell you about a little later. So let's get back to the Tommy John injury. We're all watching baseball last year, and it was crazy how many injuries there were about a year ago.
The rash of Tommy John injuries is so concerning that we've got to find an answer to slow it down.
So many young stars succumb to this injury.
Something's got to be done.
That's not the motion that anybody on that bench wants to see.
Something was not right.
His face will tell you the story.
Looked like something happened on the pitch.
He's coming out. Add him to the list.
When a pitcher walks up holding his arm like that, that's not good. I'm sure he's frightened about what might have happened to his arm. Yep. That's how you make your living. That's a scary feeling.
So again, you know, we saw it, and it was very sensational on ESPN and other networks and everything like that, MLB Network. But statistically, you know, we're data people. How many Tommy John surgeries have there been? And I want to go back and forth between Tommy John and saying ulnar collateral, UCL, ulnar collateral ligament surgery. That's what it's called medically. So how many of these UCL surgeries have there been? Well, you can see for 20 years or so, it was a pretty constant, maybe 1 a year, maybe up to 5 a year. And this is major and minor league when we say professional. And then from the next 20 years, went up, 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 up. So statistically, this is not a one-year fluke. In fact, that's 2012 right there. And then 2013 was a down year statistically. But then 2014, the little video I just showed you, things were starting to get worse again. So, you know, there is something happening here. And we did a recent study that hasn't been published yet. It's coming out. To how many people in baseball, how many pitchers actually have already had a Tommy John surgery? And here's the answer. Among all professional pitchers, 16% of them are walking around in spring training right now this week with a scar already on their elbow from having Tommy John surgery. If we break that down into major and minor leagues, I made the major league pie smaller because there are less major league pitchers than minor league pitchers. But you can see minor leaguers, about 15% of the pitchers have the surgery, have had it. 25%, 1/4 of them in the major leagues have already had it. And mathematically you might think, oh, well, maybe major league's a different game than minor league, or I don't know, you're probably thinking some excuses in your head why it is. But it's basically just age. The major league pitchers have been pitching more years than the minor league pitchers, and essentially a minor league pitcher and a major league pitcher who is at the same age with the same number of years pitching has the same chance. But the more you pitch, the longer you pitch, the more risk you have. But basically, that's the real situation here. About 25% of major league pitchers have already had Tommy John surgery. Can you play this video here? So let's talk about the mechanics.
When the elbow accelerates, all the force goes there to that ligament, and that's the primary stabilizing structure. That ligament has really very little help in that position with that kind of force. The stress that you're able to generate with high velocity pitching can exceed the strength of the ligament.
To repair the damaged ligament, surgeons drill tunnels through the ulna and humerus bones. Next, a tendon is harvested from either the forearm or hamstring. This graft is laced through the tunnels to pull the bones together and stabilize the joint. One explanation for the recent surge in surgeries appears on radar guns. Since 2002, the average Major League fastball has increased by almost 2 miles per hour, and the number of pitchers with a fastball averaging 94 miles per hour has doubled. Throwing that hard is hard on the body. Dr. Glenn Fleisig is one of the world's leading researchers on pitching biomechanics.
In the biomechanics lab, we've measured that the stress on the elbow is about 100 Newton meters.
That's 60 pounds of force, equivalent to the weight of 5 12-pound bowling balls.
For ESPN Sports Science, I'm John Brinkus.
So that's a little about, oh, that's a lot louder. That's a little about how the injuries happen, a little animation about what the surgery looks like. I want to get a little more into that thing John Brinkus and I were talking about at the end there about the biomechanics of it. So what we have is a biomechanics lab in Birmingham, Alabama. Here's a picture of a pitcher being tested. I don't know who it is. I think a high school, college pitcher. We put the reflective markers on his body, then the computer tracks the markers, and it looks like this when he's pitching. So you can see, I don't know if you saw, there are cameras all around, and then the cameras are collecting his motion in 3 dimensions, and we're getting his exact motions and his forces of how he pitches. And then we've had lots of pictures here, and we could compare them to other people. And we measure the kinematics. So for those of you who remember physics, kinematics means motions. It's the positions and the angles, and we get it directly from the cameras. Now, kinetics is, we don't measure the kinetics directly. And the word kinetics means the forces. We're very interested in the forces in the elbow and the shoulder. But you had to use some equations. It's kind of complicated. Well, force equals mass times acceleration. Torque equals moment of inertia times. I'm not going to get into it. I have a clip of Here's a professor from Charles Barkley.
Speed round. Complete as many quotes as possible, as fast as you can, and here we go. Houston, we have a
Arby's.
no. I see blank people.
2 people. You and Rebecca.
No. Life is like a box of
dead people.
May the force be
Equal to mass times acceleration.
How do you know that?
I'm not a dummy. I just haven't seen a lot of movies.
So as Charles Barkley explains, we calculate the force equals mass times acceleration from the motion data. And we've done a lot of pictures in our lab. We've done over 2,000 pictures. And of the 2,000, we take a slice of the pie of the best pictures. We use that to explain what the elbow and the biomechanics should be. And we've tested a lot of excellent pitchers, major, minor leaguers. In fact, we tested, I think, 8 guys who've gone on to win Cy Young Awards, 15 Cy Young Awards. They've all came in their underwear, and we tested them in our lab here. And I want to focus on what the elbow does during pitching. So let's just focus on the elbow, not the rest of the body right now. In the windup, the forces are very low on the elbow. You're just getting yourself ready. No one really injures their elbow in the windup. Now in the stride phase, watch this in slow motion. In the stride phase, the legs and the arms separate, but you can see that the throwing arm really goes up. And then if we stop the pitcher at the time of foot contact, the elbow should be bent about 90 degrees. Now if we watch what happens next is the arm cocking. And watch, the body goes forward, but the arm rotates back. The arm gets it back in this cocked position, and this is where the Tommy John injuries happen, in this position. The elbow should be bent about 90 degrees in this position. And from this position, watch what happens. The elbow is going to straighten out as he pitches the ball. The elbow speed is 2,300 degrees per second. That's supposed to be a video. Let's see. Can you click on that video, see if it plays? Maybe that video's not there. Anything there? Okay, all right. Well, anyway, the arm, you can see it's straightened out there, and it comes through a deceleration. Okay, let's go to the next thing. And there's large forces on the body because after you threw the ball, you still have to slow down your arm and your elbow so you could live to pitch another day. I want to focus on the elbow. When the arm gets in this cocked position, I'm just going to do a little more physics, then we'll move on. The arm gets in this cocked position. Charles Barkley and I calculated it's 100 Newton meters of torque there. Now, what does 100 Newton meters mean? So it means if I'm going this way, my body's going backward, my arm, the weight of it is trying to go this way, and the Tommy John ligament and everything else in my elbow has to stop the arm from going back and get it going forward. And to do that, it takes about 100 Newton meters. Nobody really has a feel for what 100 Newton meters is. So statically, again, if a bowling ball weighs 12 pounds and you put a bowling ball in your hand, that would not be 100 Newton meters. You would have to hold a string with 5 12-pound bowling balls to get the equivalent amount of stress on your elbow as the pitchers do at that time. So I think you have a feel for that. It's comparing static to dynamic, but clearly there's a lot of stress on the elbow in that position. Now, this is going to be a little gross if you don't want to see it because I'm going to show you what it looks like inside an elbow. But again, that's 55. We've done some cadaver experiments where we have like dead guys in our other lab, and we have elbows and shoulders, and we cut it open to see how strong things are. And so if we look inside the elbow, the ulnar collateral ligament withstands about half, 55% of the total stress. 55% of the total stress would be 55 Newton meters. And that's a elbow. If we look inside of it, I just want to show you what the ulnar collateral ligament looks like. So this teeny little thing between the yellow arrows, that is the ulnar collateral ligament. So this whole force, like this 5 bowling ball force, has to be withstood by that little ligament there. And the cadaver experiments have shown us that the cadavers can't handle that. And so really, this ligament is, most of us could not handle even one pitch. Baseball pitchers, their ligaments are a little stronger and they can handle more. Okay, I'll move past the dead guys now. Let's talk about perception versus reality, more stuff that you guys are used to seeing perhaps. Here's the trend I showed already. What's happening? Are there more injuries, or are the doctors and trainers just better at finding them? Or are the doctors more willing to do the surgery, or are patients more willing to have surgery? Honestly, I think it's a little of most of these. I don't really think the surgeons are that willing. I know the surgeons. Most of them are not that willing. Surgery is like the last resort. But patients often think surgery is what I want to do first. Anyway, so these, whether it's the pro teams, I talk to the pro teams, and sometimes they tell me, hey, maybe the guy should just go get his surgery and get it over with. That's not the right attitude, and even for kids as well. Surgery should be the last resort. That's what the doctors tell me. Okay, and here's the survey. This is interesting. This is Dr. Ahmad, who's the New York Yankees doctor. He him and his group surveyed some people at his clinic, not the Yankees, but just the patients in New York. And they surveyed, and also in the community, they surveyed some high school, college, and high school, college players, and some parents and some coaches. And they said, what do you think the chance, how many people do you think make it back after Tommy John surgery? And they said, most of them said about 60, about 2/3 that they guessed, okay? And then he asked, do you think after Tommy John surgery, velocity goes up or down? And actually about 1/3 of the people, as you can see here, thought that after Tommy John surgery, you have more ball velocity. And about a 1/3 to a half also thought that your performance will be better after Tommy John surgery. Let's see. And this part is frightening to me, actually. And again, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm the PhD guy just studying this stuff. But you can see 25 to 50% think it makes sense in some cases just to have surgery, even if you don't have an injury, because the Tommy John surgery will make your elbow better and stronger. And this is far from the truth. Because this is the truth. These are 3 studies that were published recently in the American Journal of Sports Medicine by different groups. it was weird. They're all published in the same high journal, and they really studied the same thing, and they kind of studied the same people. I don't know why the journal took 3 articles that were pretty similar, but basically they all looked up everyone who's ever had Tommy John surgery, and they said, well, how did they do, you know? And so all 3 of the studies looked up from that baseball heat maps or MLB search and got the people who did the surgery. And the Erickson group, you can see they had all the people from 74 to 2012. The reason they stopped in 2012 is because we needed a couple of years to see if they make it back. So we don't want to study the guy who had surgery last week or anything like that. But the Machny group, they said, let's not look at the old timers, because the surgery they do now and the physical therapy really has been the same since about 1999. Well, not the same, but it's really different before 99. So let's just look at the 147 people who've had it since 1999. The Zhang group, they just looked at the 38 most recent major and minor league pitchers who had the surgery. And the reason they used this 2008 is because they want to also look at the PitchFX data and see how those people did. And PitchFX wasn't in the ballparks until that year. So here's what happened. These 3 studies looked at how well people were doing after Tommy John surgery. And the Erickson study actually said that those people got better after surgery. But the Machny and Zhang study didn't say that, which is weird because they essentially, again, like I said, were studying the same people. I kind of believe the Zhang and the Machny data that say this: down like controls. What that means is that the guys who are having the surgery, maybe 30-year-old guys or 33-year-old guys who are having surgery, they make it back, and if they make it back, their stats go down as they naturally would with age, okay? So a 35-year-old pitcher would typically not have as good stats as a 30-year-old pitcher. So bottom line is Machny and Zhang said that you play about as well as you would have if you had not had the injury. This is also important. All 3 studies looked at how many actually made it back. And of the major league pitchers or minor league pitchers, well, actually, just of the major league pitchers, about 80% of them make it back. 20% of them don't, okay? And then you look at the one in the middle, Machny said 80% make it back for at least 1 game. Only 67%, only 2/3 made it back and stayed there. So, you know, you're watching your favorite player on your favorite team go down with injury and like, uh-oh, there goes a year of his career. I mean, there's a chance he might not make it back. So it's not all rosy. And also, here's another thing. You know, we're all watching Matt Harvey or Jose Fernandez. These guys were worrying, when are they coming back? And this is what the stats show. On average, it takes about 1.5 years for a major leaguer to be back in the major leagues after the surgery. Now, at our center, with Dr. Andrews and Dr. Kane and Dr. Osbar, we looked at the 1,000 pitchers we've had, and we looked at some subgroups, and we looked at the ones that Dr. Andrews did surgery on, and this is what we found, that about 80%, whether major league, minor league, or amateur, make it back. About 20% don't. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you, sorry. I got caught up here. Okay, so I did not show this one, but okay, so thank you. Their stats went down like the controls. And again, what I'm saying is their careers take the path you would expect for their age. And this is the part I wanted to say, that about 80% of them make it back. And you see over here where I say make it back for at least 1 game. Only 2/3 of them make it back and stay there. Thanks for pointing out that I wasn't getting this. Anyway, so a lot of them don't make it back. And it takes about 1.5 years to make it back to the majors, like I said. And this is the data from our group. And this data shows that 80% of anyone who has surgery from Dr. Andrews and his group make it back, and they make it back in about 12 months, versus those studies said 18 months for pros. The difference is sometimes they're ready at 12 months, but it's not a major league season. I mean, it's the off season, so they had to wait a few more months. Or sometimes they make it back in 12 months, and they get sent down for a rehab assignment to AA baseball or something like that. But these are the numbers. Let's talk about the risk factors, okay? Now, proper mechanics is a big thing to me. It's what I've studied a lot, and we've done a number of studies. And these studies have shown, I'm not going to go through all these studies, but they've shown that basically if you have good mechanics, you get more ball velocity. And if you have good mechanics, you have less stress on your arm. And obviously bad mechanics, you have more stress on your arm. I'm not going to talk about all of these, but I do want to talk about real quickly one of the studies that we did most recently. In fact, we just finished it. It was done in this past spring training, 2014 spring training. What we did was, with Major League Baseball, we worked together with Major League Baseball, and we had an agreement where we went to the spring training both in Arizona and Florida, and we brought our computers out to study some pitchers. We studied 40 pitchers who had Tommy John surgery a couple of years ago and have made it back to spring training. And we studied a group of 40 pitchers who had never been hurt. All right, and we compared them. And what we did was we had them fill out forms. Have you been hurt? We measured their range of motion, which is what you see there. He's lying on the table. We're measuring his flexibility. And then we did the biomechanics. I showed you the video before how we did the biomechanics in our lab. The technology is pretty cool now that it can now go outdoors. So we brought, instead of bringing all the pictures to Birmingham, we brought the labs to the spring training. And you can see we could either do it in a tent. Whoops, sorry. I have too many remote control things here. Okay, we could either do it in a tent like that team was doing or outdoors like that team was doing. But basically, we were able to go to spring training and collect the data. And we collected all the kinematics and kinetics again and ran it through our computer program. And we had 4 hypotheses we wanted to test, which were the guys who had Tommy John surgery, did they have kind of messed up elbow and shoulder mechanics when they pitched after coming back? Did they do some kind of compensation or change? The second hypothesis was, were they holding back? And when I mean holding back, these 2 pictures show a pitcher in a proper position. He's standing, leaning forward a little, his arms in the right position. But what we've noticed in the lab is some guys who make it back and don't quite feel right, they do this. They stand a little more upright, and they push their elbow. They kind of like do this, okay? And we can measure that and see if the pitchers were doing that. The third thing we tested was called the inverted W. The guy, this one over here, he's doing it correctly. His arm is up at the time of foot contact. This guy, his arm is late. His arm is still down at the time of foot contact. And so someone in baseball decided that this is an inverted W. In elementary school, I used to call this the letter M, but they call it inverted W, but that's okay. Biomechanically, how we measure it is we look at what the arm external rotation is at the time of foot contact, and the arm should be up like that and not down like that. So again, we were testing to see if the guys with the Tommy John injury were showing that kind of pattern. And the fourth one, biomechanically, we showed a guy who has a low elbow and then raises it. That's a stressful mechanics for the arm, and we want to test if people were doing that. Okay, so what did we find? This just got published, but what we found was that the 2 groups, we compared them. They were both throwing about 85 miles per hour during spring training, which is the same group. They were the same height and weight, et cetera. And we found no differences. We didn't find that they were any more or less flexible, and we didn't find that their mechanics were any different. So what does that mean? That means, let me click here a second. That means that these minor leaguers, once they make it back, they have the typical flexibility and typical mechanics. So they're back to normal. Now, this is really good. This is good for all you as fans or people who work in baseball or for the doctors or trainers. It means that when it works, it works. If they make it back, they're back to normal. However, we only studied the minor leaguers in that study, and I assume the same thing would happen if we studied major leaguers or high school or college pitchers, but we didn't do that. Another limitation of this study, though, was that we only looked at the guys after they made it back. And so did they have things like those inverted W mechanics before they got hurt, and did they change it? I don't know, because we only met them after they had come back. Most concerning is, or the biggest limitation of the study is we only studied the success stories, the guys who were back at spring training. We didn't study the 10 or 20% of guys who are, at home working at the car dealer or wherever and didn't make it and didn't have successful surgery. I want to tell you, we're here talking a lot about professional baseball. We work with a lot of professional major leaguers, minor leaguers. And again, I've shown this slide several times. This is the trend. But when I saw this, it reminded me and Dr. Andrews, it reminded us of what we saw in our data. Now, you look at the years here. These over here, look, we're going back in the time machine. We look at these years, and these are not major leaguers. These are the surgeries that were done at our center, okay? And if you look back in the 90s, we saw already the trend going up. Biggest concern we saw was this. These are the number of kids, high school and younger, who are having surgery. Another way to look at it is this. Back in the early 90s, the guys coming in for surgery were all college and older. And then about 1998, 99, 2000, all of a sudden, we're like, hey, are we getting older or are Dr. Andrews' patients getting younger? And then we looked at it and seriously, we were starting to get high school guys coming in for surgery and youth. Never had that before. And this was a problem. So we did a huge study. We had found like 500 kids, and we called them every week during a spring training season. And we said, how much did you pitch today? And did you get hurt? Did your elbow or shoulder hurt? And then to make it even a bigger study, we called them once a year for 10 years. All right, so this is a huge thing. We followed 500 people for 10 years. They started out as little kids, and 10 years later, they're 22-year-old pitchers or whatever, or they're out of the game, whatever happened. But what happened in the data was this. Bottom line is this. The kids who pitched more than 100 innings in competition in any year during the study were more than 3 times likely to have a serious elbow or shoulder injury, needing surgery or making them quit from baseball. We looked at it the other way to prove this. We looked at the ones who came in for surgery, and we compared their background to the ones who had never had surgery. And what we found out was this, that, again, if everyone on this side of the room here has an elbow scar, and everyone on this side of the room doesn't have a scar, and I ask questions about did you usually pitch more than 80 pitches in a game? And if I asked you, do you pitch more than 80 pitches in a game? And he said, yeah, I often pitch more than 80 pitches in a game. And if he says yes, I bet you 4-1 he has a scar on his elbow. And if you said no, I bet you 4-1 that you didn't. Did you pitch more than 8 months a year? Yeah, I did. Okay, I'll bet you 5-1 you're in the surgery group, not the surgery group. Check this out. Did you, oh, sorry, sorry, I'm losing track. Thank you. Did you often pitch when you were fatigued? If I ask you if you often pitch when you're fatigued, you say yes, I'll bet you $36 to $1 that he's in the group that has had surgery. 36 times, 3,600%. Of all my studies I've done, this is the biggest result I found. You could throw everything else away, and it basically one thing. Pitchers who keep pitching after they're fatigued end up getting serious injury. People who don't. A lot of fancy science, but a very easy conclusion. This, could you go next? Oh, there we go. Okay. Could you make Will Ferrell throw some snowballs, please? Go click on the thing. Can you click the video there? Okay. Well, it doesn't matter. He's not exactly really pitching baseball. There he goes. I just want to look at his pitch count here. It's very high. But, all right, he should be done. He should be out of ammo soon. But bottom line, he's not really pitching. But basically, the bottom line is one thing. If you get one thing out of this, all these numbers I showed in cadavers, one thing, too much pitching leads to injury. Now, people ask me, oh, is pitching natural? And they interview me, is pitching natural? Is pitching not natural? Excessive pitching is not natural. Throwing 100 full effort pitches every 5th day is not natural. On the other hand, throwing is natural. Okay? So it's a yes-no. Throwing is a natural motion, whether you're Will Ferrell throwing snowballs or whether you're this kid throwing things. Throwing is natural. Kids do this as they grow up. But throwing 100 pitches full effort every 5th day is not natural. So bottom line is avoid too much competitive pitching. And what does it say here? OK, so you want to avoid too much and avoid too little. OK, you see, another way of looking at it is this. You know, we've changed. We all remember what life was like in the 1900s. None of us remember that. But in the year 1900, what was America like? America was, I mean, there was no cars and air conditioning, and people walked to school and helped at the home. Basically, if you looked at the kids in America in the year 1900, you'd see an activity graph. You'd see a lot of kids who do a lot of activity because that was life. It wasn't, we didn't sit at home. It wasn't cushy. Half a century later, in the 1950s, this is what America looked like. And this was probably pretty good because you had a few people who still had a tough life, you know, over here. You had a few fat cats sitting on the couch over here, right? But most of America, I think, in the middle of the century, did a moderate amount of physical activity. They played on a little league team. They rode their bike. They played with their friends after school, okay? But they weren't playing full effort pitching every day. So what happens is, this is how life was like a half a century ago. This is probably how it should be. And this is how it is now, okay? What it is now is you got a few guys who are doing a lot of activity. And this is what I've been talking about, the people who are doing too much. You have a few who are probably doing the right amount. You got a lot of guys sitting at home on the couch, a lot of kids sitting at home. What are you guys doing? Are you doing a lot of activity these days? No way. OK. So are you over here in this crowd here? You broke your arm skiing, you said? OK. So you're probably doing moderate activity. But the bottom line is we need to get America more in the middle here. And I'm going to get back to focusing on these kids, because that's what I'm really here to talk about, whether the kids who are pitching too much or the major leaguers who are pitching too much. But let's not kid ourselves. There's a situation here where America has too many people not doing enough activity. Here, let's take a look at this one kid, Winston, here.
Winston, just one more inning, Grandma.
Ever notice how many things today kids can do without actually moving? A whole lot of things their parents used to do the hard way. So many kids' activities today seem to leave out the activity part, which makes exercise even more important for children. In fact, new research tells us the best time to enhance bone development is during childhood and adolescence. And just getting children to walk an extra 35 minutes a day could spare them the pain of thinning bones later in life. Healthy bones come from healthy habits. Encourage your kids to get up, get out, and get moving.
Hello. Hey, Grandma, how about another grape soda?
For more advice on how kids can build strong bones, visit AAOS.org. A public service message from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons.
So it's funny, but that's what our situation is. So ideally, everyone should play a moderate, reasonable amount of baseball or activity. But we have a situation where a lot of people are not doing enough, and a few are doing way too much. Now, the other issue is curveballs. You know, we've heard for years that curveballs are dangerous. But are they really? So we've done a number of studies to try to test it out. Are curveballs dangerous? And for years, people have been saying curveballs are dangerous. We've had doctors, trainers, coaches. Dr. Andrews and myself at ASMI have been saying it. We've been saying, don't throw curveballs until your growth plates are closed. That's what this X-ray is showing. And an easy way to say that would be, don't throw curveballs until you're old enough to shave. Okay? And that's what we were saying. So we did a bunch of studies to try to prove this, to prove our point. And what we tried to do was we did some biomechanics studies, again, back in the biomechanics lab. 2 of these studies were in our lab in Birmingham. 1 was up in Connecticut. And in all these studies, we did that biomechanics stuff. And I'm not going to show you all this stuff, but just let's talk about that elbow torque again, which leads to the Tommy John injuries. What we found out was that compared to the fastball, we expected the curveball to have more torque, therefore more injury risk. Turns out it has less. Okay? So throwing a curveball compared to throwing a fastball kind of not what we expected to find, but it shows the same or perhaps a little less torque on the elbow than throwing a fastball. Well, maybe something's screwy here. Maybe the experiment went wrong. And these are 3 different experiments, 2 different places. But we did our field studies. Remember all this stuff? I followed those 500 kids for 10 years. Maybe the ones who started throwing curveballs younger were the ones who got hurt. Nope. It didn't work out that way. And it really kind of disappointing. We wanted to prove that curveball was dangerous. So some of these were by us, some of these were by other groups. But again and again, we're doing studies to prove the curveball is dangerous, and we have not proven that the curveball is dangerous. We have proven pitching too much is dangerous, but we haven't proven throwing a curveball is dangerous. So what do we do? Okay, let's talk about prevention. Biomechanics. It's an exciting thing. I walk around this conference, and there's all sorts of new technology about tracking pitchers' motions and stuff like that. Commissioner Manfred talked about some of the innovations in baseball yesterday, tracking the motions. Behind the scenes, what's happening is also there's new biomechanics. I showed you what ASMI is doing. I just want to mention there are a few other companies that are really, we don't make equipment and we don't sell things. We're a research center. But Modus is a company that I am personally helping them develop some gadgets to measure things. I'm going to show you in a second. Sport Vision, does anyone know? You guys know what Sport Vision is. They're the ones who make Pitch FX. And up to now, they've been tracking the baseball, right? And now they are starting to track the pitcher a little more. I've been talking to them, and they've been talking to the teams. They're going to try to track the biomechanics of the pitchers a little. Dynamic Athletics is an exciting company doing it. 3P Sports, you guys know who Rick Peterson is? He was a pitching coach. He's with the Baltimore Orioles now. And he developed this company, 3P Sports, to help kids upload their video online, and then they'll analyze it and tell you some mechanics. And there's one called MLB Digital Academy. I want to talk about, and the ultimate goal that we're all trying to do, and again, I'm just waiting for one of these guys to do it so I could use it, is to develop equipment where we could track the pitchers in the games, okay? That's the ultimate goal. It's not here yet. Some companies are close. I just want to show you a video of what we are doing at ASMI and what this company Modus is doing right now.
When you pitch overhanded, the stress on the shoulder and the elbow that are distributed in order to propel the ball and make the ball go fast are very significant. In fact, it's up to twice body weight.
One of the biggest problems in baseball right now are these Tommy John injuries. And what's happened is we have more pitchers who are pitching a lot, but at a high velocity, and not listening to their body as much. Having studied the biomechanics of pitching for years and years, we do know pitchers with certain mechanical flaws have a higher risk of injury. The trick is, how can people still throw at maximum ball velocity and not hurt themselves? In the process of biomechanics, we put these reflective markers up and down in the body on bony joints. It looks like I have little light bulbs on my body. We have 12 cameras that track the 40 or so reflective markers we put on the body. The cameras are each taking 500 pictures per second, and then the computer from the different angles tracks it. Even last time you came, just a month ago, you were holding it here, but you've made an effort to bend it a little more, so that's a change in a good direction.
If pitchers are having problems, I would definitely recommend them to get this done so they can see what they need to improve and how to improve it.
If I look into the future, I think that the systems could be faster, be more portable, and Modus pitch sleeve is an example of biomechanics starting to get on the field.
We help athletes optimize their performance and also reduce the risk of injury.
We wanted to find a way to take that lab experience to the field so that they could do it multiple times per year on the field in their natural environment during games. We look at the torque on the elbow, arm slot, the power a pitcher generates with arm speed and wrist speed and elbow speed. And ultimately we look at workloads of a pitcher to understand risk of injury and optimizing their training.
The biggest issue that I deal with as a college coach is trying to manage pitchers' arms and pitchers' health. And I think that's where this can really help, is it will give us empirical evidence of maybe where a person is and if there are any changes from a healthy situation to what they're experiencing at that time.
I was walking around with one of the executives of Little League Baseball. He says, look at that, Dr. Fleisig. Right next to the radar gun speed, there's a pitch count monitor in the Little League World Series there. He says, that's because of you. And to see the effect that we're having, not on the thousands of professional players, but the millions of Little Leaguers, the effect that we're making the game safer and trying to get rid of these unnecessary overuse injuries, that's more rewarding than watching my favorite professional player.
So there's some exciting things happening in biomechanics, as you can see. But what's happening right now is that basically when we had the rash of injuries last year, Commissioner Selig at the time, and Commissioner Manfred is continuing it, formed this elbow task force to figure out what's happening. And so you can see some of those names, myself, Dr. Andrews, some of the other people who are involved to try to figure out what's happening and prevent these. So again, we met as a group, and we said, you know, this is not just a major league problem or minor league problem, it's a problem for everything from youth through pros. And so the first thing we did was we formed this Pitch Smart website. We all put our heads together and came up with this thing. So on the Pitch Smart website, which is pitchsmart.org, is a pitching guideline. So if you click on that first thing on the top left there, it has the pitching guidelines, and you can see pitch counts, all right? So you can see how many pitches the kids should pitch for different ages. If you click on a particular age group, whoops, I guess I did that. Age group, it has specific recommendations for that age group. There are also frequently asked, these are some risk factors. You have some videos, Dr. Andrews and other people showing what we think. And then you see over here where it says, where is it? Where it says, take a survey. Is this thing still working? OK, now this died. It says, take a survey. You click there, and you can answer some questions. Do you pitch in multiple leagues? How many times do you play? And then based on the science, it'll tell you you're a high risk or you're low risk for injury. It also has some frequently asked questions about Tommy John injuries. You know, do people get better after the surgery? Things I've been talking about here today. And also some resources for those people like here who want to read some of the articles. You could click on it and read some of the scientific articles. And there are also some videos, Brian Cashman, me, whoever. You could click on it, and we talk about the different topics. And so again, this website is pitchsmart.org. So in conclusion, Tommy John injuries are on the rise in professional baseball. We've kind of curbed them a little in youth high school, but it's still going up. We still got to get a grasp on it. We got to work together, analytically, as parents, as players. We got to talk about preventing so many injuries. Injuries should be avoided. It's not it's going to happen. It'll happen. You're much better off avoiding the injury, especially the younger you are. The younger you are and have the surgery, the longer you have a damaged elbow afterwards, a reconstructed elbow. So prevention is the key. Number one thing, the only thing I really was saying, listen to the body. If some guy feels good, he's probably good. If something feels a little wrong, don't blow it off. Don't be macho, don't be tough. It is going to lead to injury. Good mechanics will help your chance of not getting hurt. And avoiding overuse, big topic. So those two things go hand in hand. Good mechanics and not pitching too much. I didn't really get into this, but good nutrition is also part of the equation. Good exercise, avoiding performance enhancement drugs. You know, we always say the drugs are bad. It makes batting averages go up and pitchers and everything do better. But the way, you know, we just looked at the ligaments and tendons. What happens is when you take PEDs, you could make your muscles stronger, but the poor ligaments and tendons don't really get stronger. So if you're on the juice, you're basically making your muscles too strong for your ligaments and tendons to handle it. So don't do that. So basically, leaving this, remember the website, pitchsmart.org. That's Major League Baseball and USA Baseball is a website that we're putting together. And there's going to be more information on it in the future. Commissioner Manfred talked about it yesterday. We'll get some new things that we'll be adding to it soon. And Thank you. We have a few, raise your hand, some questions. Go ahead, you guys have at it.
You mentioned the risk factor of fatigue and how exponentially it grows.
Yeah.
How do people know, especially when we talk about kids and parents or coaches,
right,
when they reach the fatigue level?
Exactly. Okay. Excellent question. What is fatigue? Well, first of all, we try to scientifically measure it about muscle activity and stuff. It doesn't work, all right? This is the computer we need. The other computers don't work. Here's the deal. Whether you're pro or a kid, you can't be figuring it out at the moment of the game, okay? When I talk to the pro teams and the high schools, the player and the coaches, they need to know each other beforehand. They need to know this guy's a tough guy. He's been having some problems. When he's get hurt, he seems to walk around more. So basically, no one wants a player out there pitching and saying, I think it hurts a little. I think I'll call it a day. No one wants a sissy boy out there pitching, okay? So you want the pitcher focus on the game, not focus on, am I getting hurt? You want the coaches, the trainers to know him, okay? And that's what you're going to decide in the game. After the game, on TV and stuff, we talk about, oh, he pitched 100 innings this year, and everything like that. What's not shown on TV is what happens in the training room after the game. The pitchers who are taking more recovery time, usually used to be 2 days, but now it's like 3 days till I feel better. Basically, the trainers are really a key for reading when a guy is better, when it's normal, and when it's not normal. I talked to some of the pro teams. If a guy is the trainer's giving some feedback that he's not doing well, the player's not doing well, then they'll skip one of his starts, or they'll bump it and stuff like that. So basically, to answer your question, fatigue is individual, okay? And the education, the information for players is not the moment of the game, but the next day, the game after. If anything feels weird in your elbow or shoulder, if you feel pain in your elbow and shoulder, that's not normal. If you feel full fatigue of your body, that is normal. If you feel full fatigue in the game, that's your body saying, let's call it a day. Okay?
You had kind of dispelled the myth of the curveball being more damaging if the mechanics are okay. Have you looked at the split-finger pitch, specifically split-fingered fastball, and additional stress on the tendons?
So first of all, again, the curveball, just to be clear, we didn't prove it was dangerous, but we didn't prove it was safe. The way the science is, you're trying to prove it's dangerous, and we failed to prove it was dangerous. What that means is, I don't think the young pitchers should run out and learn a curveball right away. They should learn a fastball and a changeup, because the purpose of the curveball or changeup or any of those pitches is to mess up the batter's timing, okay? So again, the young kids should learn how to throw right, then pitch fastballs, then pitch changeups. That is certainly the safe way to start. Curveballs don't seem to be as dangerous as people thought, but when you're ready to add it. To your question about split-fingered fastballs, we have not studied that. We've just studied fastballs, curveballs, changeups, and sliders. And it turns out that fastballs, curveballs, and sliders are stressful. Changeups are less stressful. We have time for a few more questions.
Okay, over here.
Oh, here.
All right. At the major league level, we have Matt Harvey coming back from Tommy John surgery and Jose Fernandez. How would you define a return to success? You mentioned one appearance as being successful, but that wouldn't be successful for those guys. So how would you define it?
You don't think one game back is enough?
Not for them, no.
Right.
Or Mets fans.
Yeah. So again, it wasn't me, but these studies over here defining success, they were defining success as pitching at least 10 games, at least 10 games at the major league level. Now, Harvey and Fernandez are high profile, but some of the guys who got injured were the marginal major leaguers to start with. So that's a reasonable criteria on that one study that you have successfully made it back. Maybe they were just the borderline guy to start with. And then again, statistically, I would define success, most importantly health, that you're able to sustain and stay off the DL. And the other one, and not have a second Tommy John surgery or something like that. And the other one is your statistics, make sure your statistics match your age group or what you were. All right.
How did you determine what the proper mechanics are for a pitch? Because I'm sure there's a ton of authorities on it.
Yeah. Very good. How do we determine what are proper mechanics? Because different people are different, basically. I only got into it briefly, but basically we've done numerous studies on it. And what we found out was this. We've seen some of the best pitchers ever. You saw the Cy Young Award winners we got. Our criteria for proper mechanics was you came into my lab, you had not been injured for at least a year, and you had a high ball velocity during the test, okay? So some of those guys were the Roger Clements and those guys who came into my lab, and some of those were some college guy you never heard of, okay? So I defined proper mechanics as high fastball velocity and healthy. We looked at a group of them, about 150 of those such people, and we formed the mean and standard deviation of the group, meaning everyone was different, but one guy's stride length was this, one guy's stride length was this, and we found out what the mean and standard deviation was. So when I say what proper mechanics are, it's basically the 150 best pitchers I've ever tested by ball velocity, and it's their mean and standard deviation of their different measurements. Does that make sense? And then we did studies that showed people who were outside of those ranges as a group had less ball velocity and higher stress on their arm.
Hi there. I was wondering if you've looked at the age when they have the surgery and to see if that has an impact on their recovery or how quickly they get back to performance, whether they make it back at all.
Yeah, the answer is, I could flip it back, but basically our group, we did look at that, and there's a paper by Cain, C-A-I-N, et al., and Andrews and stuff, and it's the same success rate. It's about 80% chance of returning to your level or higher, regardless of whether you're a high school, college, or pro. Now, that's the chance of returning, but if you're a 16-year-old and you have Tommy John surgery, and I'm telling you, you have an 80% chance of being good at 18 years old, who are you going to be at 25 or 30? We don't have enough long-term data that for the ones that get injured young, it's a worrisome road ahead of them. Okay. We're going to take let's say 2 more questions, right?
Do you happen to see a higher incident rate with Dominican or Puerto Rican pitchers, since it's a year-round sport, compared to the States? Or would you say it's more of a selective surgery based on income and social status? So
actually, we did that study with Stan Conti. I show you that 16% of all pitchers have had the Tommy John surgery. And then Tom Verducci, a friend of mine, a reporter, he said, he thinks more Latin guys are getting hurt, Dominican guys. So we went back and looked in our data, and it was the same injury rate for the Latin American guys as for the American. It wasn't any different rate. It was still about a 16%, give or take a percent. Okay, one more question.
Hi, when you measure these healthy pitchers, do you keep track of their careers to see if they injure themselves further down the line to know that, well, maybe these weren't proper mechanics?
You mean we would keep track of the guys in the biomechanics lab, or from the surgery?
When you measure, you said the healthy pitchers with the highest velocity, and you deem them as having proper mechanics. If they injure themselves 5 years down the line, well, then maybe they didn't have proper mechanics.
Yeah. So we've been looking at that, and we've been looking at whether the ones who have the poor mechanics in our lab are indeed the ones who get hurt, basically. And what we found out was it was a mixed bag. About half the time they did and half the time they didn't. And what we're thinking is mechanics is only one factor, because we're also trying to work in how much they pitch. And the other thing is we're intervening. Basically, when they come to our lab and we test them, we tell them what they're doing wrong, and maybe some of them fixed it. So we have proven that poor mechanics have higher stress on the arm, and then it's a leap of faith that the guys with higher stress in the arm get injured more. So we haven't quite proven that part. Okay. I want to thank everyone for coming out here. Thank you.